The love story of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce is set to get underway tonight. The highly anticipated wedding at Madison Square Garden.
Everyone thinks they already know what happened at Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's wedding. They don't. They saw the headlines, the pink lights outside Madison Square Garden, the word married flashing across a jumbotron in the middle of a heat wave. But almost none of what actually mattered that night made it into a headline. The real story isn't the guest list or the dress, not really. It's a handful of choices this couple made when nobody was supposed to be watching, choices that tell you exactly who they are underneath all that fame. And once you know what they actually did in that arena, you will never look at their wedding photos the same way again. For nearly 2 years, the entire internet had turned into a detective agency, trying to guess when and where and how Taylor Swift would finally marry Travis Kelce. Almost every guess was wrong. On the evening of July 3rd, inside a Madison Square Garden that had been completely blacked out to cameras and drones and prying lenses, Taylor Swift became Travis Kelce's wife. The fans who track her every move the way other people track the stock market found out the same way everyone else did, through a short statement and a scattering of details that leaked out afterward. Streets around the arena had been shut down for days. Security teams and police barricades turned Midtown Manhattan into something closer to a fortress than a city block. For a woman who has spent nearly 2 decades performing for stadiums full of people, this was the one night she performed for absolutely no one outside her own circle. The man who stood at the center of the ceremony was not a professional officiant. It was Adam Sandler, and once you understand the history behind that choice, it stops sounding like a joke and starts sounding almost obvious. Sandler and Travis had grown close while working together on a film, and by all accounts the two genuinely liked each other, the kind of easy friendship that doesn't need cameras around to be real. Sandler's connection to Taylor runs even deeper, through his own daughters, who have been devoted fans of hers for years. He has talked openly, more than once, about how nervous he gets around her, not because of her fame, but because he doesn't want to embarrass himself in front of his own kids. So when this couple needed someone to hold the most important night of their lives together, they didn't hire a stranger with a script. They picked someone who already felt like family. When Sandler said the words that made them husband and wife, the arena did not go quiet for long. The giant screens wrapping around the outside of Madison Square Garden lit up in pink, spelling out a simple message that the whole building had been waiting for. Fans who had been standing outside for hours in dangerous heat finally got their answer. Roughly 1,000 guests were inside to witness it, and somehow, in an era when nothing stays secret for more than a few minutes, not one of them managed to leak the news before the couple was ready to share it themselves. That kind of control, over a crowd stacked with celebrities and cell phones, tells you everything about how badly Taylor and Travis wanted this one moment to belong only to them. Now here's where the story gets interesting, because the loudest thing about that night wasn't who officiated it. It was what Taylor Swift chose not to do. For over a decade, she has been famous for her friend group, an ever-rotating cast of models, actresses, and pop stars that the internet nicknamed the Squad. So naturally, once the engagement became public, people assumed her wedding party would look like a red carpet. It didn't. According to her own team's statement, Taylor and Travis had no bridesmaids and no groomsmen at all. Instead, her younger brother Austin Swift stood beside her as her man of honor, and Travis's older brother Jason Kelce stood as his best man. The ceremony, the statement said, joined their two families together, and that detail alone says more about this couple than any dress ever could. A woman who could have had virtually any famous face on earth standing beside her at the altar looked at all of it and chose her own brother instead. That choice makes even more sense once you understand who Austin actually is to her. He's not just a sibling who shows up at family holidays. He's worked behind the scenes on some of her most personal projects, including the stripped-down documentary where she sat and picked apart her own songwriting in front of cameras for the first time. He's someone she's referenced warmly in interviews and in her own writing over the years, someone she clearly trusts with the parts of her life that aren't for public consumption. Jason Kelce's role carries its own weight too. He and Travis built an entire media career together, turning their brotherhood into one of the most popular podcasts in the country, and Travis had already stood by Jason's side as his own best man years earlier when Jason got married. So in a strange way, this wasn't just a wedding. It was Travis returning a favor that had been sitting there for years, waiting for the right moment. 2 brothers. 2 families. 0 red carpet politics. The dress, when it finally came, arrived from Paris, and it came with its own small piece of fashion history attached. Taylor's wedding look was custom Christian Dior haute couture, designed personally by Jonathan Anderson, the man who now runs the house's womenswear, menswear, and couture collections. This was reportedly the first time in his career at Dior that he had designed a couture wedding gown for a major celebrity, which means Taylor didn't just pick a beautiful dress off someone's mood board. She became a reference point that a legendary fashion house will likely point back to for years. She paired the look with jewelry from Cartier and a custom pair of Christian Louboutin shoes, and Travis was dressed by the same house, tied to her in fabric before they were tied to each other in vows. Anderson himself later described the process of designing her dress as an emotional one, saying the two of them became genuine friends through the collaboration, which tracks with everything else about how personally this couple seems to have approached every detail of the night. Even the ring carries more history than most people realize. The diamond Travis proposed with the year before is what jewelers call an old mine cut, an antique style of stone with softer, rounder edges and a warm glow that modern, machine-cut diamonds simply don't have. It was designed by Kindred Lubeck, a jeweler and hand engraver who runs a small studio called Artifacts Fine Jewelry. Taylor herself later revealed that she had shown Travis a video of Lubeck's work more than a year before he ever proposed, almost in passing, and he quietly filed that detail away and used it when the moment came. That's not the kind of thing you fake for a camera. That's the kind of detail that only means something if you're actually paying attention to the person you're planning to marry, and it's exactly the sort of quiet, old-fashioned gesture that fits a man marrying a woman who's built her entire career on the idea that small details carry the most meaning. The guest list, of course, still looked like an award show, because there's no version of this wedding that wasn't going to draw some of the biggest names in the world. Selena Gomez was there. So were Gigi Hadid and Bradley Cooper. Hugh Grant showed up with his wife. Ethan Hawke made the trip, along with a wave of Taylor's longtime collaborators and friends. The sports world showed up in force too, which makes sense for a groom who spent his career inside the NFL, with players and coaches from his own team among the crowd filing into the arena. Reporters and photographers camped outside for days, cataloging every black SUV that rolled up to the curtained entrance, because that was as close as anyone outside the guest list was going to get. But the absences told their own story, arguably a louder one than the arrivals. There's no confirmed indication that any specific former partner or estranged friend was formally excluded, and speculation about exact guest snubs should be taken with real caution, since most of it comes from anonymous sourcing rather than anything either Taylor or Travis has confirmed directly. What we do know is that the guest list leaned heavily toward the people currently closest to both of them, family, longtime collaborators, and friends who've stuck around through years of both of their careers, rather than a broader circle built purely on celebrity status. That, on its own, tells you something about where their priorities were on this particular night. Then there's the matter of just how enormous the operation around this wedding actually was. The couple reportedly filed permits to shut down the streets surrounding Madison Square Garden for several days around the event. New York City, a place that famously does not stop for anyone, effectively bent around one wedding weekend. The timing made things even more dramatic, because a brutal heat wave rolled through the city that same week, with heat index warnings from the National Weather Service reaching levels officials described as dangerous without proper cooling. Guests were shuttled into the arena through covered, air-conditioned entrances specifically built to shield them from both the heat outside and the cameras trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening within. Security costs alone were reportedly a massive share of the overall budget, with total spending on the weekend estimated in the tens of millions of dollars, though exact figures vary depending on the source and should be treated as informed estimates rather than confirmed numbers. The night before the ceremony, the couple gathered a much smaller group, somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 close family members and friends, for an intimate rehearsal dinner inside the same building. It was reportedly a warmer, quieter affair than the main event, the kind of evening built for people who actually know the couple rather than people who simply admire them from a distance. Around the city that same week, other members of their extended circle kept popping up in public, spotted at restaurants and hotels, which only added to the sense that all of New York had quietly become the backdrop for this one couple's story, even if most of it was happening behind closed doors. The date itself wasn't chosen at random either, and that's worth sitting with for a moment. Taylor has said publicly, more than once, that she loves numerology and pays close attention to the meaning behind specific dates, so it's safe to assume the timing of this wedding, landing right before one of the biggest holiday weekends of the American calendar, wasn't an accident. Choosing to marry the night before the 4th of July guaranteed that the entire country's attention would be locked onto them at exactly the same moment, for better or worse. Not everyone loved that choice. Plenty of people online pointed out the disruption to a major holiday weekend, the extended street closures, and the sheer scale of spending, and that pushback became its own small conversation running alongside all the celebration. What makes this wedding worth talking about isn't really the price tag or the security operation or even the fashion, as impressive as all of it was. It's the pattern underneath all of it. A woman who built her entire adult life around being watched chose, for one night, to be watched by almost no one at all. A couple who could have filled their wedding party with some of the most famous faces on the planet chose their own siblings instead. A groom who could have bought literally any diamond on earth chose one with 100 years of history already built into it, based on a passing comment his future wife made over a year earlier. None of that reads like image management. It reads like two people who, even with unlimited resources and the whole world's attention on them, still wanted their wedding to feel like theirs. So when you strip away the headlines and the guest list and the estimated cost, what's actually left is a fairly simple story. Two brothers standing where a wedding party usually stands. An old friend saying the words instead of a stranger. A ring built around a memory instead of just a price tag. And a couple who, for one night, managed to turn one of the most public relationships in modern celebrity history into something quiet, deliberate, and entirely their own. That's the part of this wedding that actually deserves the attention, far more than any photograph ever could capture. Let me know in the comments what detail from this wedding surprised you the most, because there's clearly more to this story than what made it into any single headline.